Resident Evil.
This is the nostalgic voiceover when starting up the game for the first time that we so fondly remember. Just like so many other PlayStation 1 era games, the original does not stand up to the test of time. The game mechanics, like the fixed camera angles and standing still to aim, are woefully outdated for 2020. That is a thing of the past. Literally. Resident Evil 3 Remake is the first real one since the initial release in 1999. I say this because the Dreamcast, PC, and GameCube versions do not count, as these are just direct ports, with the GameCube being the only true HD version. The game takes place during, before, and after Resident Evil 2, with a different set of protagonists. The story revolves around Jill Valentine, a STARS member, as she runs around Raccoon City trying to avoid being killed by everything and everyone. Mainly, spoilers here, by the Nemesis, whose name has been dropped from the title for this remake, but is still very much in the story. This time around, you'll be hunted even more at every turn, all the way to the safe rooms as you progress throughout portions of the game, only letting up during large plot-driven events and certain puzzles. Capcom has asked reviewers kindly not to give away any secrets, which I would have to argue it's the same enemies, same plot and story from 20 years ago. However, besides a few major plot events, everything has been reimagined down to the boss fights, location, and puzzles. The enemies are technically the same, so don't expect anything new. Besides the first 15 minutes, you'll be hard pressed to see any resemblance of the original game present in this remake. It is hard to write an unbiased review, especially when it involves video games, as they are arguably very subjective. So I'm not going to write a review this way. I simply cannot be subjective for this game. This is basically where my review ends on a professional level. If you like the original Resident Evil series, Outlast, Evil Within, or Aliens Isolation, you'll feel it right at home. No need to continue watching this video. Go buy the game or at least play the demo. That being said, I myself do not like those games for a number of different reasons. But let's start the conversation with my biggest issue: unreasonable gameplay mechanics. What does that mean? Well, for Resident Evil 3, the zombies, or namely undead, are not like the other ones defined by the genre, and it is unfair to call them as such. These mindless, walking corpses are actually infected by the T-virus, a staple of the Resident Evil franchise. They are walking parasites and human meatbags, for a lack of better description. This means any chance of taking them down with a single headshot is non-existent in the Resident Evil world. It takes 4 shots to the head with a pistol on normal difficulty for them to fall down. Someone will get back up after a few seconds or grab Jill by the legs as she tries to walk by. That is a big problem for me, and these undead are everywhere. Either you'll need to stand around waiting to see if they get back up, or chance it by quick dashing past them. This makes slow sections really boring, and the rapid gameplay areas with swarms of undead a little too much for my taste. Even more unappealing is the lack of deadliness of the knife. Even in the last resort, after running out of bullets, it's smarter to dodge the enemies as much as possible. It takes 10 stabs to take one of these zombies down, and another 5 quick jabs to keep them dead. All the while, you have your legs and arms bitten off when you get too close. What's the point in having a knife that takes up a precious inventory slot if it does nothing useful? This is a question I've asked myself countless times while playing Resident Evil 3. The combat is lackluster, and this is just a common undead. Either you run past everything the best you can, or shoot until you run out of ammo and try to avoid everything afterwards. Once you encounter an oversized human monster that is mutated by T-virus, it becomes obvious the goal is not to kill anything unless it's truly blocking your path. Rather, the objective here is to dodge everything the best you can. Yes, I mean dodge, because this is what Capcom has named it. Simply start a run and sidestep the enemies the best you can. However, even when you take down the unwanted roaming undead, they will reappear after a cutscene or randomly respawn while the old corpse is still on the ground. It is frustrating to say the least with the little ammo you have early in the game, just to see those undead reappear minutes later. Did I mention the Nemesis yet? Well, it'll chase you round and round Raccoon City, which is the main plot of the game as in the original too. In the early game, you will climb a ladder and he will magically be in front of you when you reach the top or shortly after. The late game is just about staying ahead for those plot-driven sections to force you along into new areas. The newly added dodge mechanic is missing from the original game and is intended to give you a bit of rush as you briefly stay out of reach of the undead. But this is short-lived since the environments are so small, dodging never really works properly, and you end up getting attacked from multiple angles at once after you run into a crowd of undead. Personally, I found the best part of Resident Evil 3 is when the Nemesis wasn't around. Without giving anything away, it seems to disappear often and reappear with even bigger guns, and it gets uglier. Eventually you get to the point in the game where you're safe from being followed 24/7. It doesn't mean the Nemesis is gone though. This is the best parts of the game. Solve puzzles, shoot the undead with big guns. Best of all, not being followed around while I explore. I often forgot where I was supposed to go or what puzzle I was currently working towards throughout the game. Not because it was hard, just really boring. It didn't help I had ceiling monsters who ran away and attacked you from behind in an unreasonable short amount of time, or that the nemesis would simply take a knee every time I blasted it. Resident Evil 3 would be a short game if you could kill the original game's main boss within the first 30 minutes. But exploring the world is just not an option when the monster is present. You spend time just dashing around and trying to avoid stupid deaths that totally weren't your fault. The reappearing undead makes it annoying to say the least, when all you want to do is make it to the next area. That is because you aren't allowed to explore at certain plot-driven portions of the game. Once you are forced to move on, areas become locked off and cannot be returned to. I hope you picked all those locks before triggering the plot device, thus pissing off the nemesis as it chases you around the city. What little puzzles exist are very underwhelming, so don't expect a Silent Hill or Tomb Raider level of problem solving. This is just a ploy to get you to move around. Go to point B, release generic switch, walk back to point A, have zombies respawn. Oh wait, now you have to go to point C and do the same thing again. At every puzzle I was hoping to get my mind worked a little, but really it takes zero thought as it's straight to the point. The plot was weak in 1999, even though it barely resembles the original game. It still has a strange twist and a plot that leads nowhere like Capcom has done for nearly all Resident Evil games. So what is the saving grace for a game which has enemies that don't die like you expect, yet a small exploding barrel takes them out for good? Not much, I say. This game is broken in so many levels, but the late game is so much more enjoyable if you're able to endure the first 3 hours with limited supplies. So let's move past the whole zombie aspect. Even if they're bearable to you, the story isn't something worth a mention because let's face the facts, it's Resident Evil. The movies have a better plot line than any of the games, and that isn't saying much. Which brings me to my next complaint. What is with the inventory setup? Why are you able to carry a full arsenal of guns, yet 5 plants take up all the spaces? It is silly to think that someone can be healed from a neck bite with a houseplant or a spray can. You can make your own bullets with gunpowder, but no need for brass or empty casings. I guess what I'm looking for is a more grounded experience. If I cannot relate to the undead, Raccoon City, or the main characters, why do I even care if Jill dies, or if anybody else for that matter? Things like poor crafting and inventory mechanics pulls me out of the little care I had for the Resident Evil world. Now I'm just killing the undead so I can say I finished the game. The game does offer an assist mode after you die a billion times. The perks are that you automatically get healed if you stand around long enough, you get a full inventory and an assault rifle from the start. Not enough for me to say, yes, that fixes all my problems I had with the game. Thanks, Capcom. It just makes the game really easy and completely boring. What might be the only saving grace here could have been the partial in-game quick saves. Now, instead of having to reload your last save, sometimes the game will throw you a bone and place you right before the last key event. You'll never know when this will happen, or if you'll be loaded back into the save room. This is another fumble. While I like the idea of getting a retry right where I died, the keeping in the moment, it makes the game less scary, as specific game save locations do not particularly matter anymore that the game series is known for. Capcom has a lot of half-baked ideas. Either keep the saves like the original or don't. None of this, maybe I'll load you next to the boss again. It breaks the horror atmosphere of the game and it becomes a cheap run and gun game. I think the only reason to remake this game, besides for a nostalgic cash grab, would be to change the core gameplay mechanics, updating it and giving players something new to experience. Capcom actually has done this. This isn't a nostalgic road down memory lane. Besides Jill, the nemesis, and major plot points, mostly everything has been reimagined from the ground up. The first step was to add a dodge function, which it has, but it doesn't work half the time, and all you do is get bit by enemies that are clearly outside the reach zone. Capcom was on a roll with new ideas, but could have done so much more. My next request would be to remove the silly inventory restrictions. If you're going to have unrealistic enemies that never stay dead, don't limit what I can carry. But it gives realism, you say. Well, it would if these aforementioned undead didn't always respawn, and the same mini-bosses weren't always knocking on my door all day long. You can't have it both ways, Capcom. Well, I guess you can, but it doesn't make a good game. My initial thoughts were positive. When I started a fresh game and saw the first-person perspective and dark atmosphere, I was like, yes, this is the game I want to play. But the veil quickly came off, and I found it just to be the same old Resident Evil game with a fresh coat of paint. Though it is unreasonable to say this because very little of the original game is present in this one. It's not just our HD remake, but rather a whole new game. That being said, it still carries the Resident Evil vibe that you either love or hate. I would have liked to see Capcom add a classic mode for those who want to keep things a bit harder with those strange inventory restrictions and typewriter save points. Instead, we're stuck with half-baked gameplay that was just okay 20 years ago. I would have rather liked to see Dino Crisis remastered over this game. At least killing Dino dinosaurs with the same weird restrictions and fixed cameras, as obscene it may be, would be much more enjoyable. Other games already do the whole being chased by a giant game-ending boss better, so go play those instead. Maybe I am just sour that I was teased an awesome new take on Resident Evil at the beginning, only to find out this isn't the game at all. I would say if you liked Resident Evil 3 before, this remake might do justice. I just remember being the original and forgetting I even have it until this review. Replayability is only for speedrunners. It is a short game first time around, and even shorter if you know what you're doing and where to go. Replayability for non-speedrunners is a questionable thing. My first playthrough on normal clocked in about 4 hours and 33 minutes, 13 deaths, and I missed 2 chests, presumably around the start of the game. Afterwards, the shop is unlocked from the main menu, in which you can buy items like infinite ammo guns, lockpick tools, or healing coins to name a few. These are bought with in-game currency that comes from completing tasks like killing 1,400 zombies. It is an invitation to replay the game on a higher difficulty, but what's the point? Nothing new happens. If you ever played a game with infinite ammo, it gets boring really fast. I much have rather seen a longer campaign, limited saves, new enemies on a harder difficulty, and extra rooms to explore. Maybe a keycard that you only get after your first playthrough. It is hard to recommend this game to anybody but the utmost hardcore Resident Evil fans. While it looks great, this isn't on my top 5 for Resident Evil games.